The structure of today's masterclass is I'm going to give you some content on why do we do a literature review, the purpose of it, where does it fit into a bigger academic process, and then we're going to do some examples. I'm going to give you an example of a good literature review, and I'm also going to give you an example of a very good academic article so that we can just make the link between the two. How do you go from an article that you've searched for into a literature review, just to make it a bit more practical. If there are any questions at the end of the session, please feel free to ask me. Okay, so the first thing that I want to start with this morning is where does a literature review fit into a research process? So any research process that you do, you have a problem or a certain issue that you want to deal with, or in the case of the PG DIPs and the people in the MBA who do a IBP, there's a certain problem that you want to deal with. And to be able to solve that problem and to get to a solution at the end of the day, in the middle of these two, you need to find evidence. And to get that evidence, you can go two ways. You can do a literature review, and you can also do some field work or research, as it's called as well. And this is going to assist you to get from the problem to the solution. And this is where the literature review fits in. So we're not going to talk about field work and research today. That will be dealt with in the research methodology side of the research process. But literature review is a way of finding evidence to solve a problem. And that's where it fits into either your PG DIP project or your dissertation for your MBA or even assignments. Everything that you do in your academic work in the PG DIP and the MBA has a problem that you start off with. Something you want to explore, something you want to know more about, and you want to get to a solution. And you do that by finding evidence to prove the solution. You can't just say in an academic style or academic work, you can't just say, this is the answer because I think so. It's my view and I tell you now this is the solution. In an academic research process, you have to have some evidence to prove why you are giving that solution. And that is where the literature review fits in. So what is the purpose of a literature review? Why do we do literature reviews? The first one is very important, or the most important one in your context, is to gain an understanding of the existing research and debates that's relevant to a particular topic or area of study. It's very important to remember that in your purposes of study, in both PG DIP and MBA, you are doing a literature review. That review word is very important. You are not doing a literature study, for example, where you are coming up with new literature and new ideas that you do when you do a PhD. You are here to look at existing research and you review it to fit into your problem to get to a solution. It's helping you to solve a problem. It won't always be a direct fit, but you can derive from what you find in the literature review some bits and pieces that help you to solve your problem. So remember that this is always a review. Unfortunately, at the level of studies where you are at now, you are not allowed to critique literature. You're not doing a literature critique, where you get to the definition of a competitive strategy by Porter, and then in your document you say, I totally disagree with Porter. You can do that one day when you do your PhD and you put a new strategy process in place. This is just reviewing what you found. So it also provides evidence, as I've said now, to solve the problem at hand in your study, and that is for your purposes in both the projects in the PGDIP and also in the MRC in the MBA. That is the main reason why you're doing it. The purpose of it is to provide evidence to solve a problem. It also helps you to build knowledge in your field. So more on the MBA than on the PGDIP, where you are doing a study in a certain field. In the MBA, you have to choose a module in the MBA that's linked to your research project. And you then, for example, choose leadership as the topic. And that's the field of expertise. Now, you might not be an expert in leadership, but for the purposes of the study, you need to get to the core of leadership. Who are the main authors in this? Who are the people who debate about leadership? Who are the people who are the most knowledgeable about leadership? And that then helps you to build your knowledge in your field. As you read for the literature review, you get a better understanding of how research findings are presented. That is a very valuable purpose of doing a literature review. Most of the articles that you're going to use for your literature review are going to be academic articles, and the author of that article had to do research to get to that document. It's the output of a research process. So in that, you can see how people structure their findings and how they get from this is the problem, this is my evidence, this is my solution. So it's an extra benefit of going through a literature review to see how people get to research findings. It's going to provide you a foundation of knowledge on a specific topic. And I'm going to go later on, I'll show you an example on how to find this actual topic. What is the main topic that you are dealing with? Because many students battle with this. Where do I now start with this literature review? Where's the starting point? What do I focus on? Because if you do a search on a search engine like Emerald or ARC or whichever one you use in Google Scholar, you will get to millions of hits on that topic. Now, where do I start? What's the starting point to all of this? And we will still get to that. It helps you to identify the relationships of works in context of its contribution to the topic and to other works. So you cannot do a literature review using only one article. You can get into a lot of trouble if you use too much of one source, one reference. So you are now, say for example, again, you want to get to a definition of strategy. You are going to now find 10 definitions of strategy. And now you need to start comparing them and say, but these 2 or 3 definitions are very applicable to my study. It's going to help me to solve my problem. But there's also an opposite view to all of this. And then you can say in your literature review, I looked at 10 different definitions, but for the purpose of this study, these 2 are the most appropriate. So you can start making comparisons between different literature review articles. And then the very nice part to all of this is, I don't think you always realize, but when your document is completed, your project or your MRC, that then becomes part of the literature review of somebody else. So you are contributing now to a field of study. So once your document now is completed and it goes onto a system somewhere, then you are in that literature review of the next person who wants to now see what other people's views are, and now your literature becomes part of this whole pool of literature review. So that is also why you need to do this in a very good manner and do correct referencing and make sure that it is all a good academic work, because it is going to be out there once you've done it and people are going to have a look at it and they are going to use it in their studies. So that is mainly the purpose of a literature review. That's why we do it. So what are the different elements of a literature review? If we start there at the top and go clockwise, the first one is that a literature review helps you to locate the major formative works in the field. Now, that is very important in a literature review, to get to the core of a certain field of expertise. So if you are doing, and I want to at this point apologize for all the strategy examples, but that's my field of study. So I know I can talk with confidence on the topic. That's why I'm using that as an example all the time. But if you want to get to a definition of strategy and you just quickly Google it, and in Wikipedia or in some Google site, somebody yesterday said, you know, this is what strategy is actually all about. You are not getting to the major formative works in the field. So if you do a strategy study, you have to go back to 1959 when Ansoff said this is the first definition of strategy. You need to get to the core of it. That's what we're looking for. This is an academic approach to research. So you need to find the core, the major formative works in this field. Otherwise, we see that you did a quick and dirty job of this and just quickly Googled it. Google is a wonderful thing, but it can also be dangerous in this instance. Then you must also certain key researchers working on this topic. You will find that when you go into a search engine and you find articles on your topic, you're going to see that there are maybe more than one article of the same author. Then you start seeing who are the researchers in this field, who are the people who write about this regularly. And they are also a very good part of a literature review, or a good place to start for a literature review. Then you also need to find main ideas, conclusions and theories, and establish the dissimilarities and the differences. It's important when you do a literature review that you must be very critical. You need to say, these are the similarities between what people say, and these are the differences. I sometimes get students who come and see me and they say to me, but what am I going to do now? This person says A and this person says B, and they are in opposite directions. Now, which one do I believe? Which one is now the relevant one? You then go back to your problem and you take the one that's most relevant as evidence to solving your problem. And you can then say in your document that I also found an opposite view to this, but I'm not using it for the study's purposes. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But you have to determine where the differences and where the similarities are. The similarities give you a stronger argument. If 10 people said something, then you can believe it is a fact and you can use it very successfully in your literature review. Then you need to notice the main methodologies and research techniques that is used within the literature that you're finding. It's also a nice way of seeing how people derived from through a certain research methodology their findings through the articles that you are working for. Another element is that you identify gaps in the existing research. We find in many cases with newer topics, There's a lot of people doing studies at the moment on the fourth industrial revolution, the digital transformation, all these new topics. I see it in every second proposal that I'm reading at the moment in the MBA. And there's not that much that's been written on it yet. So it is also fine to say in your literature review that I found this definition of the fourth industrial revolution, but this is an area where there is still gaps in the literature. And hopefully through your literature review and your findings, you're adding to that gap, you're filling the gap by adding something new onto this. So there's two different types of literature reviews that we find. The one is where it is on a very established topic, like strategy, for example, or leadership, or aspects of people management. Those are topics that has been researched for decades. There's so much research on it, and they are the father of research and the father of strategy, and there's a foundation, a strong foundation, and that's your starting point, and then you go on how it evolved up to today. Then there's other set of literature review, which are the more recent type of topics, mainly in the IT field, things like systems thinking that came about in the 90s, things like that are newer. You won't find all that evidence going back centuries. You have to find your starting point in a more recent place. And your literature review will have more recent articles in it than the one that's got a lot of literature from the past. I get the question from many students on what's correct, how many years back do we go with literature, how recent must it be? So your topic will determine that. If your topic is on the fourth industrial revolution, you should have a lot of documents that's written in 2018 and even in 2019, and it's very recent. In the last 10 years or 5 years, it's been a relevant topic. If you're doing a study on strategy, I want to see those articles in the 1950s and 60s, where strategy was defined for the first time in a business context. But I also want to see what the new researchers are saying about those definitions of strategy in 2018. But the balance is different. In the one, it's more older and less new. In the other one, it's a lot of new and less older. Does that make sense? So that is the difference in the different literature reviews. So there's not a right or a wrong, and there's not one answer to saying that it's only recent and it's only in the last 5 years, or it's dependent on what you're working with. That determines the years of your literature review. Then it also shows you the relationship between previous studies. It's always good to look at other people's studies when you do a literature review. I always tell the MBAs that when you choose your topic, go and do a search on the database of University of Reading and see who else did similar studies in that field. And those studies can guide you towards some literature sources, which you can then go back to and use it again as a primary source in your study. So use existing research as well. And then it provides you the content for your own research. Remember, when you do research, it is about finding out something new. A research process is different from an assignment. An assignment, you have a topic and you use the theory that you found in your studies, and you get to a solution. In a research process, there's always something new. You go out and you interview people, or you send out a survey and you find something new. And then the literature review supports that. It tells you that it does exist. There are other people out there who also talks about this. And then the last element is to explore the existing information in the field of your specific research. So I just want to show you something that you can use when you do a search in research. If you go to, like the ARC, for example, and say you now do a search, you put in there strategy, and you get to about 3 million hits on definitions and aspects on strategy, you're going to see the articles coming up in a certain order. And they are in the order from the most relevant to the least relevant. Now, in this example that I'm using, it's not a good example because you know, everything can be relevant in strategy. But if you have, for example, an advanced search where you put in strategy and differentiation, for example, it's going to order them for you from the most relevant to the least relevant. And then you're going to see there person A, the year 2018, and the name of this article. And the one at the top should be most relevant to what you're looking for. But somewhere below that name, or the article's name, you're going to see cited, and you're going to see related. This different search engines look different, but somewhere you'll find those words. Now, if you click on cited, it's going to tell you how many people have read that article. And from an academic point of view, that's a very good indication if it's a good article or not. We as researchers, when we want to become an A researcher or a B researcher, and you apply for that, they ask you in the application form, how many times have your articles been cited? And you give that number. And that qualifies you as a very good researcher or not. Do people read your research or not? So it can give you a very good indication if it is a good article, because it's a cited article, it's a good article, people found value out of it. Related means that if you click on that, it gives you more articles of that same author. So if you read this article and it's really spot on, this is what I am doing my study on, and you want to read more about it, you click on related, and there might be another article that the same author wrote that is very relevant also to what you are doing. And that is the way how you dig into the deeper levels of the research. That you don't only stop at this page and what now, what do I do next now? That will guide you into more articles and more sources of this topic that you have put into the search, either on the EBSCO or Emerald or the ARC, whichever source that you are using. Is that all still clear? Are you all still good? Okay, sorry, now we need to do this again. Okay, so something else that I found when I prepared for this masterclass that really for me made a lot of sense is, where does your literature review fit in? Sometimes you do the literature review just for an article or for a project or for an assignment maybe, but you can also do it as part of a dissertation. So the scale on this matrix is that the literature review is either selective or comprehensive on this scale, the horizontal scale, and it's part of a larger work, or it is a standalone literature review on the other axes. And if we look at selective and part of a larger work, it can be only an introduction that you are writing. You are just explaining that I'm going to do this literature review. It's very selective, and it forms part of a larger work. If it is more comprehensive, but it's still part of a larger work, that is typically the literature review that you find within your dissertation or your MRC. For the PG DIPS, an MRC is a management research challenge. That's what we call at Henley a dissertation. So that is where that fits in. So you must always remember it must be very comprehensive, but it is part of a larger work. It's not a standalone. You still have field work on the other side of the equation that also contributes to the solution. The literature review on its own is not giving you the solution. It's part of a larger work. And then on the standalone part is when it's selective, it can be a course assignment. You just want to, in your assignment, have a little bit of evidence that it's not only you saying what you're saying in the assignment, you're adding one or two sources to say person A and person B and person C also said something about this. Then you are selective, but you are doing it as a standalone. And then when you do a review journal article, that is then something that is very comprehensive, but it is a standalone. You don't do anything else than that to get to the solution that you want. So I thought that's just a nice way of looking at where does it fit in. Another very important thing that you need to remember when you are doing your literature review in either your PG DIP or your MBA, we are aiming for this red block, the academic type of category of literature review. So if we start on the left-hand side, a simple literature review is a brief overview of the topic, not necessarily purely academic in scope, and often using popular sources. So you read in the Star this morning, or you saw on News 24 this morning that some journalist said that the economy is still not growing. Then you take that as your foundation, that an economist said that the economy is not growing, so you're now analyzing why the economy is not growing. So it is not, you're using popular sources, and this review is usually the start of a research process. So I'm going to say something dangerous now. You must understand me in the right way. I also sometimes, when I start with a brand new research piece, start at Wikipedia. Because Wikipedia is one of those popular sources that gives you the simplest definition of something. I had to do a research piece the other day that was part of a case study that we're busy writing on entrepreneurial opportunities. That's the concept that I had to research. So I just put it into Wikipedia. It gave me the simplest definition, and then I knew what is it about. And I closed Wikipedia and I forgot about Wikipedia. And then I moved on, but I knew where to go and look now for something. What is this definition? So a popular source sometimes gives you that simple definition as a starting point, and then you can go into the more academic work. But Wikipedia, take note, is not accepted as a reference in an academic piece of work. So you only use it for other purposes. When we move then to the applied block, then we see that it's used in businesses, in government, in other professional environments, where the applied literature review are fact-finding exercises. When you do a report for work, you're not going to do a literature review the way you do it here. You're going to find facts and state facts. The economic growth in South Africa currently is 0.5%. The population is so and so and so. South Africa is trading with so and so and so. That's fact-finding. That is applied research. It's not taking literature and analyzing it and combining it and looking at similarities and differences and then deriving something from it. That is academic research. So that is applied research, and what I find in many cases where I supervise students is the first round of a literature review chapter is applied research. They're just putting down facts. They read 100 articles and they're so proud of those 100 articles. They try to get all the information in there. And they sometimes end up with 20 pages of that chapter. And then we need to break it down to 3 pages. But it's only applied research. That's the easier one. You just find facts and you state the facts. When you get to academic research then, what we're aiming for is whether it's a standalone or a part of a paper or a study, the academic literature review requires accuracy, quality, resources, objectivity, thoroughness, and quality analysis with more depth. So now you go to good sources and quality sources, and you start interpreting that information. You don't just give it out there. If we can go back to the definition of strategy, you don't just say, person A said, this is what strategy is. Person B said, this is what strategy is. Person C says, this is what strategy is. Full stop. Now we go to the next section. That's applied research. But if you, at the end of those 3 definitions, now say, in the above 3 definitions, I found this and this and this concept in there, and this is applicable to the study that I am busy with. Then you move to the academic block. Does that make sense to you? This is very important because you have to get to this red block if you want to do a good academic literature review. So you cannot do a literature review without references. And the literature review is not a summary of each source. Many students fall in that trap. You read the article and then you put a little paragraph out of that article. And then you read the next one and you put a paragraph. And the next one and you put a paragraph. That is not what a good literature review is about. When you do a good literature review, you are comparing and contrasting each source to other relevant sources on that topic. So you have to have more than one source on a certain topic that you can start comparing and saying this person said this and this one supported the argument, or this one has a very different argument. And that's how you start analyzing it. You critically evaluate each source. You indicate how each source contributes to the body of knowledge about the topic. And you integrate your discussion of the sources into your argument about the state of the knowledge on this topic. You need to be very clear on what is the existing knowledge, where are you contributing to it, and where are you just adding on to this body of knowledge. So a literature review is about an evaluation of the reference sources. It's not just cut and paste and saying that this is what I found in each one of the sources. That is not a proper reference source. So referencing plays a very big role in your literature review. This is a separate masterclass. This is now an ad break for the other masterclass. If you want to come to the plagiarism masterclass. But I'm going to just give you a brief crash course in the referencing side, because we cannot talk about literature review without talking about referencing. So referencing is an integral part of your literature review. In Henley, we use the Harvard referencing style. You need to find that Harvard referencing style guide. You all get it. PG Dips on Pelupele. I think it's in your handbook. In the MBA, you get it at your starter workshop. There's several versions of it in summarized and detail and everything on Blackboard, on RISES. And are there any new MBAs here? On Canvas as well. I was in trouble the other day in a workshop. I only spoke about Blackboard and RISES, and the MBAs did not have any idea what I was talking about because they are now on Canvas. So all of those sources that you use, the platforms, they all have the Harvard referencing style. Now, we get a lot of questions of people saying that we will use the referencing of Word. In Word, you can choose a referencing style, and you can then let it do your referencing for you, your reference list. There are many of these software packages that do it for you. Mendeley, RefWorks, they do this exercise for you. When you use that, and I'm not saying don't use it, it's very easy to use and it makes life much easier, but once you're done with your project or article or MRC, go back to pure Harvard referencing style of Henley and just check that all the detail is correct. Every university has their own Harvard referencing style, and it's small changes. Some put the year in brackets, others put the year in bold. Some put a comma here and a full stop there. Just make sure that you are working according to Harvard referencing style. And because you will choose on Word Harvard referencing style, but it might be a little bit different from what we give you in the guide that you received. So the main part of referencing is that there are 4 things that you must reference: direct quotes, paraphrases, a map, a graph, a diagram, and if you use somebody else's ideas in your own words. So I just want to quickly show you in practice what this looks like. The first one is direct. A direct quote that you are using. So if you are using it, and I'm not talking about referencing in text, I'm not talking about a reference list. The reference list must contain everything that you've used in text. They must cross-reference. I'm talking in text now. If you are using a direct quote, you can say in your text, according to person A, and then in brackets you say 2018, and the alternative is 2018, page 13. The definition of strategy is close the quote. It must be in exclamation marks because it's a direct quote. That is the one way around in text. The other way is when you start off with the definition of strategy is, and then in brackets you say person A, comma, 2018, page 13. Okay, so page numbers, some reference, Harvard referencing says there must be a page number when it's a direct quote. Others are not so strict on it. If you have the page number, put the page number with a direct quote. You're safer to put it there. The dilemma we have currently is with online sources, that sometimes there are no page numbers anymore. The page number is the online number 1 of 15 or 2 of 15. There's not a page 13 that's in the journal indicated anymore. And that's why we're not that strict on the page number. But if there is a page number, then please put it there. It is very important to do it. Then when you do paraphrasing, so paraphrasing is where you are now using somebody else's work, but you are saying it in your own words. Then you start writing on strategy has the characteristics of, and then you start saying all the stuff that you've read. You don't put it in exclamation marks because it's not a direct quote. But at the end of the paragraph that you've written, in brackets, you say person A, 2018. And if that paraphrasing part, maybe you use 2 or 3 people's views that you've now combined in your own words, then you can say there, person A, person B, and that then is how you show that it's not your own work. You've used parts of other people's work. In paraphrasing, you must be very careful to not just add in a few of your own words. Many people do that. The best way to check that is through Turnitin. If you put that through Turnitin, the person you're quoting, their words will be in one color, and then all those little words you added in are in another color. It's quite shocking to see it if you think you've now rewritten this part, and actually you've just added in a few words. So be very, very careful. If you are not sure about the paraphrasing side, rather put too many references than too little. Don't think that, this paragraph is really my own thinking. You know, I just read it somewhere and now I'm giving my own view on it. Rather go the safe route and put there that it is, you give recognition to somebody else who has actually read this. Then the third one is where many people get into trouble in terms of Turnitin and plagiarism, and that is where you have graphs or tables or something. And I'm talking about graphs and tables that you found in a source. It's somebody else's. I'm not talking about you've done your own research now and you are depicting your results in a table, in a graph. That you don't reference because it's brand new, you thought it out, it's your work. But when you use somebody else's, if you now have a graph that you put into this document of yours and it shows something on the graph, this is now figure 1, and some styles put it above and others below. I'm not talking about that now, with its heading. Below this graph, you put their source. And then you reference it exactly the same as you do in text. So you must say the source of this is person A, 2018. If you now take that graph and you decide that I'm now going, this is now, say for example, the growth in share prices in South Africa. And now you decide I'm going to now put my company's growth in their share price there, on top of it, just to show something, a difference or something. In that case, the source is adapted from person A, 2018. Okay. And then the third option is where you develop this on your own. In many of the MBA studies, students try to put the structure of their study in a picture, like their dependable variables and their independable variables. They want to just show it visually, what the study is going to be about. If this is brand new and you have designed it and you put it into this document, then the source is researcher's own. So that's the three options when it comes to graphs or tables or something, pictures that you put into your documents. But you have to reference it. We see it in many, many cases that's where the slip comes when it is put through Turnitin. So that's the important one. And then the fourth one, where you use an idea of somebody, you do it in the same way as paraphrasing. Okay, so that's the four main ways of doing referencing, and this is how you need to deal with it in the literature review. And as I said to you earlier on, every reference that you use in your literature review must be referenced in the reference list at the back. You cannot put anything in the reference list that was not used in text, and the other way around. If it's in text, it must be in the reference list. So that's the purpose of a reference list at the end. We do also find reading lists at the end of a document. That is stuff that you've read, but you haven't used it in your document. You just read it as background, or you just wanted to find out more about it. Then that becomes a reading list. But that's not compulsory to put a reading list in a document. You can put it there. We find some students feel very strongly about it, that I have read 50 articles already, and I want to show you that. Then you put your list there, by all means. But we're only interested in what you've used as a reference list, not the rest. So you need to have a good balance between research, and with research I mean what you found in articles and what people have done already, and your own arguments. You can't have a literature review that's only what other people said. Somewhere you need to make your interpretation of it and give even a summary of it. A very good practice right from the start, and I'm looking specifically at the PG Dip students here, start getting into this discipline as early as possible to keep notes, a list of your references as you start reading more and more about something. You're going to now read an article and you think, oh no, this is not applicable to my current assignment. A year later, you want to use that same article and you know you saw it somewhere, but you cannot find it again. Keep those articles. If you think it can in any way be relevant, start getting into that discipline to keep the good articles, put it in a reference list somewhere in a database, or use RefWorks or something to put it in there. Avoid reusing earlier work. That's called self-plagiarism. And we see more and more of that popping up on plagiarism on the Turnitin side. And that is where you have now done this very good assignment. And you think, oh, I'm halfway there now with my dissertation. I've done half of this work already. And then you just take that assignment and you cut and paste it into this dissertation because you've done the work already. It's your work. That's self-plagiarism. When you do a new piece of research work, you must go back to the primary source. You can refer to that assignment or something to say, in previous work or research, I found this and this, final finding. But then you have to, when you reference in a literature review, go back to the primary source again. You cannot use that piece, unfortunately. That is known as self-plagiarism. And then please use Turnitin. People are scared to use it. Nobody else will see it. Only you see that score, and then you can stay awake for one night and worry about it, and the next day you fix it. So it's between you and Turnitin. So on both the Pelopele and the and Rices or Blackboard, you will find they call it different things. Some say it's a playground area, others say it's a test area, but you can there put your article in and it disappears after you've seen the score. Don't put it in the final Turnitin, the real system, because it stays there forever. And then when you put the same thing in there again, it picks up as 100% plagiarism because your article is there. Remember, Turnitin is only a system. It's got no intelligence. It compares, it makes similarity checks. It sees in this document, this is there, in this other document, the same paragraph is there. Or it sees information and there's no reference to it. That's what it picks up in Turnitin. So you need to make sure that all the referencing is correct and you have done the right paraphrasing and you've done all your referencing. Put it through Turnitin, check what you've done, and under 20% similarity is acceptable at Henley. So if you get under 20%, you're okay, don't worry about it. If it goes over 20 and you don't know what to do about it, please go to your lecturer or your PD or myself or anybody who can help you, but you have to get that score down because it means that somewhere your referencing was not correct. I haven't seen in my dealing with this any cases of real plagiarism. People don't deliberately just plagiarize in an academic environment. Why would you do that? It's wrong referencing. In 99% of the cases, it's wrong referencing. So we can fix it. So let's go to the literature review process. So the first thing that you do is you identify your topic, your concept, your aspect that you want to do the literature review on. And that can be, if I use the MRC as an example, that can be your title or your problem or your research question, your objective. In the PGDIP side, the title of your project, the objectives that you set for yourself in your project, what you want to achieve with it. And then the way to go about doing this is I'm going to use the title or the problem that I dealt with in my PhD, and that is that I looked at customer experience as a strategic differentiator in retail banking. So that was the problem that I dealt with. I analyzed that, and that was what my whole study was about. So as a starting point, where do you now start with your literature review if this is now what you want to get information or evidence on? So you go and find the concepts in this topic. So the first important concept is customer experience. The second one is strategic differentiator, and the third one is retail banking. So that's your starting point. So you then go into the ARC or Emerald, and you put in there customer experience. And you will get a lot of different sources on that. But as you read about it, you now going to, and that's what I found by doing this research, I came across a lot of different definitions of customer experience. I also came about the fact that it's actually, it evolved over time. There's an evolution. It started with service quality in the 80s, then it went to customer service in the 90s, then it went to customer experience after the year 2000. So there's an evolution. So the minute I saw that, I then went back and I did a search on customer service and service quality to get into what this is now about. So that's how you delve deeper and deeper into this. And once you've done that, you then go into strategic differentiator. And when I put that in, I got to strategy, I got to differentiation, and I also came across the concept of a competitive advantage, which is very closely related to differentiation. And that helped me to delve deeper and deeper into this topic until I could find enough evidence to give an answer to, is customer experience a strategic differentiator in retail banking? So you have to find that evidence. And then the third area is retail banking, which was more of a fact-finding exercise to say that there are so many retail banks in South Africa, this is how big they are, this is what they do, this is how their turnover is, their profitability. And by gathering all this evidence, I could then start putting a literature review together that would lead me to solving my problem. That's the only reason why you're doing this. So you will find that you're going to start reading and you're going to find the most interesting articles. And then you think, yo, I better change this topic of mine because this is much more interesting that I've now found. You're going to get there, I promise you. Force yourself to put it there next to your bed as some bedside reading for another day, but stick to your boundaries, stick to your topic. Once you've decided what you're working on, there's no turn around in an academic environment. Remember, you've got a time frame. In the MRC, you've got only 6 months. In the PG DIP, you have how much time for your project?
Very little.
Very little, a few weeks to work on it. So you cannot now, after a few weeks, decide, no, let's change the topic. Let's go on to something else. You're not going to make it time-wise. So once you've taken the decision, stick to your decision. And that then becomes your boundaries on what do I read for my literature review and what do I put aside. And I'm going to show you in a very short while the actual, an example of how you can very quickly see if an article is relevant for you or not. So we'll get to that. Okay, so the first thing then, identify your topic, your concepts, your aspects, and then you start doing the research through your search engine. Now, for the MBA, the ARC, that's the Academic Research Center. It stands for Academic Research Center. And in the PG DIP, you've got the Emerald, EBSCO-host on Pelopele. Another very good one is Google Scholar. Don't go Google straight. There's too much risk in Google. The reason why I'm saying that is so many people put any possible thing on Google, and you will not know if it's academically sound. You will not know if it's maybe a plagiarized article or something that was not properly written, because everything goes into Google. Google Scholar has a filter already to make it more scholarly in terms of the articles that's on Google Scholar. What I do as in my own research is when I find Google Scholar is a very easy search engine. It's very user-friendly. So I put my topic or my idea in there, and then the articles that come up, most of them in Google Scholar, you must buy them. I just copy that article name, and then I put the whole reference of that article into the ARC or into Emerald. And then you find it there and you get it for free. But it's sometimes more difficult, especially in the ARC for the MBAs. it's very difficult to get to that actual article in there. It's sometimes you just can't get to it through your search method. But if you put the full article, its name, its authors, then it takes you straight to that article. And then you get it and you have it for free. So that's a way of using Google Scholar, but it's also a very good a platform to use. And then you can also look for books, for articles, for papers, opinion pieces, reports. It's always good as a starting point of your research to look at like magazines or newspapers or something relevant or recent, just to substantiate why this topic is important. But when you go to the actual literature review, you must go to more academic, sound sources that you find on these platforms. Then you start reading through all the sources and you identify the relevance and the contribution it can make to your review. And this takes a lot of discipline. You have to force yourself to only read and put into your document what's relevant to your problem. So the better your problem is described, the easier this is. If you know exactly what you're dealing with, it's going to be an easier process to do. Then you write the review, you utilize your sources through direct quotes, through paraphrasing, and through your own interpretation. And then never end a section or a subsection with a quote. It's not good academic practice. Put some interpretation to it. I mentioned earlier on, if you have, for example, the definition of strategy, and you just put these 5 definitions there and then you stop. It's almost hanging. There's not, why? So what? Why did you say this in your literature review? You have to add a sentence or a paragraph that says, the above definitions are going to help me to write my, to solve my problem. Or it will say that I'm interpreting this as there's so many similarities and so many differences, and in this study, this is going to be the result of it. And I just want to correct myself, what I've just said. You always write in the third person. You don't write in a literature review, I did this or this. If you refer to yourself, you are the researcher. The researcher interpreted these definitions and found this and this and this. Conclude each section or the end of your whole literature review in your own words. Don't end it with what somebody else said, because you're not reviewing then what other people said. You're just putting facts out there. And then we're back to applied versus academic research. So interpretation all the time. What did I see here? What's it helping me with? What's the interpretation of this? Every time as you go through this literature review. So I would like to just hand out an example. Okay, so the literature review, this document, this is an example of a literature review that comes out of a study. So it's got no context. I'm just showing you the structure of it and how some of these aspects that I've spoken about, I found them very well represented in this article. And I've also added a reference list at the end that you can just see what the format is. It's not going to correlate with this chapter because this is the literature review of a full study. So it's not going to be possible to cross-reference the whole thing because it's 2 different aspects. One of the students were very clever. He picked it up immediately in the workshop and said, but there's some things in here that's not in here. And it's because you're not getting the full picture. It's just an example, just to show you what it must look like. So in this literature review, you will see that it's linked to the research question that is under study here. So it starts off in the introduction by saying this is the literature which is related to the research question presented in this previous chapter. So it contextualizes it. It tells you why it's looking at these things. And that's something very important in a literature review. You must explain why you've chosen those 4 things. I read a chapter of somebody yesterday again, just yesterday, and it just started off with 2.1 retention. The definition of retention is so and so. So my question is, why are you looking at retention? Where does this fit into this bigger picture? So you have to contextualize it. Why are you researching these different topics? So this person chose those 4, and then if you go to 2.2, you will see that in that first paragraph, what I want to show you is making a similarity known. That's a good example of that. Payne and Froese state that companies are da-da-da-da, that's what they said. This is confirmed by Duplessis and Lombard. So can you see the person found 2 sources that's both supporting what he wants to say about retention. So the one said this, and this is supporting what the other one said. And then what the style that this one is written in is that the conclusion is at the end of the document. It's not at the end of each section. So that's also a way of writing it. So you will see that there's a piece on retention, then it goes into persistency, then it goes into customer relationship management, communication, and the reason why it ends with a quote, and I said to you earlier on, don't end with a quote, is because right at the end, there's now observations and conclusions. But this person might as well have put that at the end of each section. That's also a nice style of using. And you can also see here that that's how the referencing is done. Palmer, if you look at paragraph 2 under retention, Palmer et al., that is referencing of more than one author, but the first time you use it, you use all of the names. So this means it's the second time that it's referred to. So the first time you put it in text, it's Palmer and person B and person C and person D. The second time you use it, you say Palmer et al. Full stop, comma, and the year. So I just thought to give you an example of what's a good. The other thing about this literature review that for me was very good is that this person started off with a 10, 12-page document just referencing everything. He just dumped information. And we managed to get it down to the absolute core in 6, 7 pages. This is the essence of it. And it explains the concepts in enough detail to be a good literature review. It's not 100% correct. All of them have some flaws in them, but I thought this was quite a nice example of a literature review. The other document that I gave you is an example of an academic article. This is an article that's just been published in an international journal. I gave you my own article because of copyrights, and then I know I'm safe. This article is not a research methodology article, it's a literature review article. So the only research that we did for this was only a literature review. We didn't do field work. So it's a good example of a literature review on its own, as a standalone in an article. And what I want to show you is if you are doing a study on strategy, or let's say sustainability, your study has something to do about sustainability or your project. When you get this article, the topic is content and strategy, managing Sanlam for in and about change. If you go to the abstract, this part here, in that, by only reading the abstract, you should, if it's a good abstract, you should know that this is an article that's relevant or not. You don't have to read the whole story, because it will show you this is about business sustainability. This is what I'm looking for, so I put it in my A list. I'm going to use this article, definitely. It also gives keywords, which can also help you. This one is about context, it's about sustainability, it's about management. So the keywords can also help you. Then I want you to just have a look at the end of the document, there's a section, Findings and Discussion. That's the section you go to first. Because in most cases, the type of research you are doing for both PGDIP and your MBA, you're not necessarily interested in all the research that this person did to get to the findings. You want to use the finding as an evidence. If you then look at the findings and you see, but here's something that I want more detail on, then you go back into the detail in the document. Then also, if you go to page 25, in the right-hand side column, there's a reference to Thies 2012. And Thies is a very big author on dynamic capabilities. So maybe you have something in your study that's about dynamic capabilities. And now you pick it up in this article. Then you go back to the reference list at the back, to Thies. And there's his full article that was used as a reference in this document. And that's the primary source. Then you go back to your search engine and you find that actual article of Thies and you refer to it directly. That's better referencing than just cited in all the time. Because you can go the route of saying Thies cited in Drotskie and Verhoef. But it's much better academic practice, especially if your study is about dynamic capabilities. You're looking for those key authors and who are the big researchers in this field. Then it's better to say Thies straight. You went back to his primary source. You did not go to him cited in somebody else's work. So that's just some examples of how you can use an academic article. You can also, if you now read this article and you see that this is about context and it's about history of an organization, you can now go and do related articles of the authors. And you will find other articles that are also written on the same topic. Myself and Professor Verhoef do research in business history. And this article is in a series. This is about the third one. We were asked by Sanlam to do a study on why they still exist after 100 years. So we started in 1918 and we analyzed their whole management system. We found their, the minutes of their board meetings from 1918. They archived it up to 2018. And we worked through all of that and we found all of these aspects from those minutes of the meetings that they had. So this is article number 3 out of that whole series. This one starts in 1945. So the others were in the wartime and all the different contexts. We looked at the context a lot. So this is an example of going to related articles that I've mentioned earlier on that might be more relevant to what you are busy with. But you need to dig deep to find these things. You can't just do one search and put in there your title and think, voila, here's all the articles. Everything is now there. I just read these few and then I'm fine. You have to really do a review. You go deeper and deeper. You get to a certain point where you see, no, now it's taking me in the wrong direction. This is now not relevant anymore. Then you start on another angle. You go into that angle, into depth, and that is how you do good research and a good literature review. Okay, so thank you very much for coming on this Saturday again, and I hope this was of help to you. And watch out for the next one on either plagiarism or research methodology.